The first human missile strike hit a Korath bioship like a hammer blow. The alien vessel writhed in space, its organic hull spurting green fluid into the vacuum. Then, impossibly, the wound began to close. "Target is regenerating," reported Tactical Officer Jae-hyun from his station aboard the Soul's Fury. "Damage reduced to 30% and falling." Admiral Han-woo watched the display with professional interest. The Vellani data had warned them about this, but seeing it happen was different. The Korath ships were not just vessels. They were living creatures that could heal from almost any injury. All ships switched to thermal charges. Let's see how well they heal from being cooked from the inside. Across the human fleet, weapon systems cycled to a different type of ammunition. These warheads were designed to create superheated plasma that would burn for several minutes, making regeneration impossible until the fire died out. The second volley was more effective. Korath ships began to burn in space, their biohulls, unable to repair themselves while being consumed by artificial stars. But there were so many of them, and they were beginning to adapt to human tactics. "Enemy ships are changing formation," called Jae-hyun. "They're clustering together, sharing biological matter. Sir, they're becoming stronger." This was the Korath advantage. Unlike human ships, which fought as individual units, the alien vessels could combine their capabilities. Smaller ships merged with larger ones, sharing weapons, armor, and processing power. What had been 2,000 separate targets was becoming a smaller number of much more dangerous enemies. Fighter squadrons launch immediately. Break up those formations before they can merge completely. Squadron leader Minho was already in his cockpit when the order came. His fighter, the Busan Lightning, shot out of the carrier bay, followed by 47 other human craft. They were small compared to the Korath bioships, but they moved like nothing the aliens had ever seen. All fighters, attack pattern Delta, hit the connection points between merging ships. Minho dove toward a cluster of Korath vessels that were beginning to link together with organic cables. His fighters' weapons were designed for precision strikes against specific targets. He fired a burst of high-velocity rounds at the connection point between two bioships. The organic cable exploded in a shower of green fluid, separating the vessels before they could complete their merge. Around him, other human pilots struck similar targets, preventing the enemy from forming larger ships. But the Korath were learning fast. Defensive weapons sprouted from their hulls like thorns, filling space with biological projectiles that moved like living things. These were not the simple energy beams or missiles that most species used. They were organic creatures bred for a single purpose: to hunt down and destroy enemy fighters. "I've got hunters on my tail," called pilot Yu Jin over the communication system. "These things are following my maneuvers exactly." "Use combat pattern 7, Minho replied. "Random movements, no predictable course." This was something human pilots had learned during centuries of aerial combat on Earth. While most alien species flew in perfect formations with calculated precision, humans had learned to be unpredictable. Earth's violent weather and dangerous wildlife had taught them that survival sometimes meant doing things that made no sense. Yu Jin threw her fighter into a spinning dive that would have killed most alien pilots from the acceleration forces. The Korath hunter creatures tried to follow but could not match the sudden direction change. They flew past her position, giving her a clear shot at their control ship. The human fighters swarmed through the Korath formation like angry insects, too small and fast to be caught by the larger weapons but deadly to the organic connections that held the enemy fleet together. Meanwhile, the main battle continued as the human fleet pressed deeper into the Vellani system. Each Korath ship they destroyed seemed to teach the others how to fight more effectively, but the humans had their own advantages. "Sir," called So Young from her communication station, "I'm intercepting Korath communication signals. They're confused. They don't understand our tactics." "What do you mean?" "They keep trying to analyze our behavior patterns, but we're not following any standard military doctrine. They've conquered 47 civilizations, but they've never seen anything like human combat methods." This was true. Human warfare had been shaped by thousands of years of fighting on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. They had learned to use terrain, weather, and pure stubborn determination to win battles against impossible odds. Most aliens fought wars like chess games with careful planning and logical moves. Humans fought wars like street fights, using whatever worked and changing tactics faster than the enemy could adapt. Commander Taemin, Admiral Hyun-woo called, to the Marine leader, "Prepare for boarding operations. I want teams on those command ships." Taemin had been waiting for this order. Marine operations were what humans did best, close quarters fighting where their physical advantages became most obvious. "Teams ready, Admiral. Which targets?" "The 3 largest bioships. If we can capture their command systems, we might be able to disrupt their coordination." "Sir," interrupted Jinnah from her science station, "the Korath ships are internally hostile environments. Acidic atmosphere, biological defenses, living walls that can attack intruders. No known species has ever successfully boarded one." Taemin grinned, checking his armor seals one more time. "Good thing we're not a known species to them." The Marine assault boats launched from the human fleet like bullets, each carrying a squad of soldiers in full combat armor. These were not the ceremonial warriors that most alien species fielded. These were the descendants of humans who had learned to fight in jungles, deserts, frozen mountains, and burning cities. Taemin's boat struck the hull of a Korath command ship and immediately began boring through the organic armor with plasma cutters. The ship's biological defenses responded instantly, trying to seal the breach and dissolve the intruders with acid secretions. "Breach in 30 seconds, called Marine Yujin, working the cutting equipment. "Hull is trying to heal around us." "Then we go in fast and hard," Taemin replied. "Remember, these things have never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of." The breach opened, and the Marines poured through into an environment that would have killed most alien species in minutes. The atmosphere was toxic, the temperature was near boiling, and the walls themselves were trying to crush or poison the intruders. The Marines moved through it like they were walking through a park. "Target the neural clusters," Taemin ordered, studying his scanner. "These ships are basically giant animals. Cut the brain, the body dies." They fought their way through corridors that writhed and twisted, past defensive creatures that emerged from the walls like nightmares. The Korath had never faced an enemy that could function in their internal environment, and their biological defenses were not prepared for armored soldiers who could survive anything. Behind them, more Marines breached other parts of the ship, spreading through the bio-vessel like an infection it could not fight off. On the bridge of Seoul's Fury, Admiral Hyun-woo watched the tactical display as his forces pressed deeper into enemy territory. The Korath were adapting to human weapons and tactics, but they were also revealing their own weaknesses. "Sir," called Jae-hyun, "we're getting reports from the Marine teams. The Korath command ships are more vulnerable from the inside. Their internal defenses are designed to process captured enemies, not fight them. And the Vellani?" So-young checked her long-range sensors. "Some cities are still transmitting, sir. They're fighting a ground battle on all 3 worlds, but they're still holding out." The thought of the peaceful Vellani trying to fight for their lives filled Hyun-woo with cold anger. They were scientists and artists, not soldiers. They had spent their lives studying mathematics and creating beauty, and now they were dying because monsters wanted to steal their knowledge. "All ships. Increase rate of fire. Fighter squadrons. Focus on the bioships attacking Vellani cities. Marines, accelerate your operations. We're not here to fight a long battle. We're here to win quickly." Deep in the Korath command ship, Taemin's team finally reached their target, a massive organic chamber filled with neural tissue that pulsed with stolen thoughts and memories. This was the brain of the ship, the center of its intelligence. "Plant." "To charges," he ordered. "High-yield thermal. I want this thing to burn from the inside out." As his Marines worked, Taemin could feel the ship trying to understand what they were. Its alien intelligence probed at his mind, trying to process the concept of a creature that could function in such a hostile environment. What it found there terrified it. The Korath were used to consuming the minds of peaceful species, civilizations that had never known real violence. When it touched a human mind, it encountered something completely outside its experience. The mental patterns of a predator species that had learned to use its killing instincts to protect instead of destroy. The ship's neural systems began to overload, unable to process the contradictions in human psychology. How could the same mind be capable of both extreme violence and selfless sacrifice? How could creatures so dangerous choose to help instead of conquer? Charges set, called Marine. Eugene. 30 seconds to... The final battle for the Volani system began when the human fleet charged directly into the heart of the Korath formation. It was not a tactical maneuver that any military academy would teach. It was pure human stubborn determination to win, or die trying. Admiral Hyunwoo watched from the bridge of Soul's Fury as his ships dove toward the massive Korath queenship that floated like a dark moon at the center of the enemy fleet. Intelligence reports indicated this vessel controlled the entire Korath operation in the sector. All ships, concentrate fire on the queenship, he ordered. Ignore everything else. Sir, called Tactical Officer Jae-hyun, we'll be flying through. The entire enemy fleet will take massive damage. Then we'll take damage, Hyunwoo replied. But that queenship dies today. The human vessels pushed through waves of Korath biofighters and defensive drones, their armor taking hit after hit from alien weapons. The destroyer Incheon's Pride lost its main engines and began to drift, but continued firing until its ammunition was gone. The cruiser Daegu Thunder had its hull breached in 3 places but kept flying. This was what made human ships different from those built by other species, where most aliens designed their vessels for efficiency and elegant performance. Humans built them to keep fighting even when they were dying. Fighter Squadron Leader Minho led the final attack run against the Queen ship's surface defenses. His squadron was down to 12 fighters from the original 48, but they flew with the desperate precision of pilots who knew this was their last chance. Target the bioweapon clusters, he radioed to his remaining pilots. Clear a path for the Marines. The fighters dove through a storm of organic projectiles that moved like living creatures, each one designed to track and destroy enemy aircraft. Human pilots had learned to fly in Earth's violent weather, dodging lightning and navigating through hurricane winds. The Korath defensive systems were deadly, but not more dangerous than a thunderstorm over the Pacific Ocean. Minho's fighter, Busan Lightning, took a direct hit from a bioweapon that ate through his left wing. The craft began to spin out of control, but he managed to stabilize it long enough to fire one last missile at a Korath weapon cluster. The explosion cleared a landing zone for the Marine assault. Commander Tae-min led the boarding operation personally, riding an assault pod directly into the Queen ship's organic hull. His Marines had been fighting for 8 hours straight, their armor damaged and their ammunition running low, but they had volunteered for this mission, and they would see it through. The Queen ship was different from the other Korath vessels they had boarded. Where the smaller ships had been like attacking individual animals, this was like diving into the nervous system of an entire planet. The corridors pulsed with neural activity, and the walls themselves seemed to think. Stay together, Tae-min ordered as his team fought through passages that twisted and changed around them. This thing is trying to separate us. The ship's defenses were more sophisticated than anything they had encountered. Organic barriers grew from the floor to block their path. Acidic fog filled the air, trying to dissolve their armor. Creatures that looked like living nightmares emerged from the walls to attack them. Marine Yu-jin, the demolitions expert, worked to place charges on critical structural points while her teammates held off the ship's immune system. Commander, this entire vessel is one giant organism. If we can damage the central nervous system, the whole thing should shut down. Where is it? Dr. Jinah's voice came through the communication system from Soul's Fury. According to the bioscans, there's a massive neural cluster about 2 kilometers inside the ship. But Commander, the Korath are using it for more than just ship control. They're processing the captured knowledge from every civilization they've conquered. If you destroy it, you'll be destroying the accumulated wisdom of 47 species. Tae-min paused for a moment. The knowledge of 47 civilizations was irreplaceable. Art, science, philosophy, all the achievements of entire species. Destroying it seemed almost like committing genocide against the already dead. Then he thought about the Volani cities being dissolved by Korath bioweapons, about peaceful scholars being processed for their memories while still alive, about All the species that would die if the Queen ship escaped to bring reinforcements. "Plant the charges," he ordered. "Some things are more important than knowledge." As the Marines fought their way deeper into the ship, the space battle above reached its climax. The human fleet had been reduced to 15 functional vessels, but they had managed to damage or destroy most of the Korath support ships. Admiral Hyunwoo watched his tactical display as the Soul's Fury exchanged fire with Korath vessels at point-blank range. His ship's armor was failing, life support was running on emergency power, and half his weapons were offline. "Sir," called Communication Officer So Young, "the Villani are requesting permission to join the battle. They've armed their remaining ships with our weapons." On screen, Elder Nimtar appeared from the bridge of a Villani science vessel that had been hastily converted into a warship. "Admiral, your people have fought for our survival. Allow us to fight for our own freedom." Hyunwoo wanted to refuse. The Villani were not warriors, and their ships were not built for combat. But looking at his depleted fleet, he realized he needed every ally he could get. "Permission granted, Elder. But stay behind our formation. Your people are too valuable to lose." The modified Villani ships joined the battle, their elegant hulls now bristling with human weapons. They fought with the desperate courage of people defending their home, making up for their lack of military experience with pure determination. Deep inside the Queen ship, Taemin's team finally reached the central neural chamber. What they found, there was beyond anything they had imagined. The room was filled with organic neural tissue that pulsed with the stolen thoughts of entire civilizations. Memories, knowledge, and consciousness swirled through the alien biomass like ghosts trapped in a machine. "My God," whispered Marine Chanwoo, the heavy weapons specialist. Are those the minds of the people they killed?" Jinnah's voice came through their communication system, now filled with horror. "Commander, the bioscans are showing millions of individual consciousness patterns. The Korath don't just steal knowledge. They preserve the actual minds of their victims. All those people are still alive in there." The Marines stood in silence for a moment, looking at the writhing mass of neural tissue that contained the trapped souls of 47 civilizations. They had come to plant explosives, but now they faced an impossible choice. Destroy the Queen ship and free the trapped minds through death, or let the vessel escape and continue the cycle of conquest. "Commander," called Yu Jin, "the charges are ready. What are your orders?" Taemin looked at the pulsing neural mass, thinking about all the people whose minds were trapped inside. They had been enslaved by the Korath, forced to experience their own civilization's destruction over and over again. Death might be the kindest release he could offer them. "Detonate in 60 seconds, he ordered. "All teams, emergency extraction." The Marines fought their way back through the Queen ship's increasingly desperate defenses as the vessel realized what was about to happen. The organic corridors tried to trap them, acidic gases tried to dissolve their armor, and living weapons tried to tear them apart. But they were human Marines, trained to fight in impossible conditions and too stubborn to give up. They blasted their way through barriers, survived in toxic environments, and kept moving even when wounded. They reached their extraction point just as Yujin's charges began to explode. The Queen ship died like a wounded animal, screaming across all frequencies as its nervous system burned from within. The massive vessel began to break apart, its biohull separating into chunks that drifted away into space. With the destruction of their command vessel, the remaining Korath ships lost coordination completely. Some fled toward the edge of the system, others simply stopped functioning as their connection to the hive mind was severed. Admiral Hyunwoo watched from his damaged bridge as the enemy fleet disintegrated. His own ships were barely functional, held together by emergency repairs and the stubborn refusal of their crews to quit. "All ships, report status," he called. Of the 37 vessels that had entered the system, only 12 were still capable of combat operations. The others were either destroyed or so heavily damaged they could barely maintain life support. Hundreds of human soldiers had died to save people they had never met, but they had won. "Sir," called So Young, "incoming transmission from the Villani surface. All 3 worlds are reporting that the Korath ground forces are retreating or surrendering. The invasion has been stopped." Elder Nimtar appeared on screen again, his alien features showing what humans had learned to recognize as tears. Admiral Hyun-woo, there are no words in any language for what your people have done for us today. You came when we called for help, and you paid a price we can never repay. Hyun-woo looked around his damaged bridge at officers who had given everything to win this battle. Elder, we didn't come here for payment. We came because someone needed help, and helping people is what humans do. In the distance, the wreckage of the Queen ship continued to burn. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Hyun-woo stood in the crystal gardens of the Vellani capital city, watching the survivors rebuild their civilization. The underwater city had been damaged but not destroyed, and the graceful alien architecture was slowly being repaired. Dr. Gina walked beside him, carrying a datapad filled with reports from both species. The medical teams have finished treating the last of the Korath poison victims, she reported. Dr. Yoonji's antidotes worked better than we hoped. Most of the affected Vellani will make a full recovery. And our people? 43 dead, 112 wounded. Commander Taemin is still in medical care, but he'll survive. The Marines who were exposed to the Queen ship's neural toxins are showing some psychological effects, but nothing permanent. Hyun-woo nodded, watching. Vellani engineers work alongside human technicians to repair a damaged habitat dome. The two species had very different approaches to problem solving, but they were learning to work together. Admiral, called Communication Officer So Young as she approached through the garden. We're receiving messages from Earth Command. They want a full report on the engagement. What did you tell them? The truth, that we encountered a hostile alien species that was committing genocide, and we stopped them. Hyun-woo smiled grimly. Earth Command would not be happy that he had ignored direct orders to avoid alien conflicts. But the alternative, letting the Korath continue their conquest, had been unacceptable. Sir, So Young continued, we're also getting messages from other sources. Word of the battle is spreading through alien communication networks. Apparently, the idea of humans as Deathworld protectors is causing quite a reaction. This was something Hyun-woo had expected. For years, humanity had been known throughout the galaxy as the dangerous species from the violent world, too unpredictable and aggressive to trust. Most aliens avoided human space out of fear. Now that reputation was changing. The galaxy was learning that humans were dangerous not because they wanted to conquer, but because they were willing to fight for others. Elder, Nimtar approached through the garden, moving slowly through the water-filled pathways. The elderly Vellani leader had aged visibly during the crisis, but his eyes still showed the sharp intelligence that had guided his people through their darkest time. Admiral, he said in his liquid voice, I bring news from the Council. We have been in contact with the survivors from other worlds the Korath attacked. Many species are still alive, hidden in remote colonies or refugee fleets. How many? 12 species have confirmed survivors. Others may still exist but have not yet responded to our communications. Jinna looked up from her data pad with excitement. Elder, if we can locate these survivor groups, we might be able to help them rebuild their civilizations. The knowledge, preserved in the Queen ship's neural matrix, was destroyed, but the survivors still carry their culture's traditions. This was the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. The Korath conquest had scattered the survivors of dozens of civilizations across space, but they were not lost. With human protection and Vellani coordination, they might be able to create new homes. There's something else, Elder Nimtar continued. We have been monitoring long-range communications. The destruction of the Queen ship has sent shockwaves through the Korath Empire. They are afraid. Afraid of humans? Afraid of the concept of humans. They have never encountered a species that could resist their neural assimilation techniques. Your people's psychological patterns are completely outside their understanding. Commander Taemin arrived at the garden, walking slowly but steadily. His armor had been replaced by simple civilian clothes, but he still moved like a soldier. The Marine leader had spent 2 weeks in medical care, recovering from exposure to the Queen ship's neural toxins. Commander, Hyun-woo said, you should still be resting. I'll rest when I'm dead, sir. Taemin replied with a tired smile. Besides, I wanted to see what we accomplished. He looked around the garden, where Volani children played in the water while their parents worked to repair their city. Was it worth it? The cost, I mean. Yuan Wu considered the question. 43 human soldiers had died to save people they had never met. 12 ships had been destroyed or severely damaged. The human fleet would need months to return to full strength. But the alternative had been the complete extinction of the Volani civilization, followed by the Korath expanding, their conquest to other peaceful species. Eventually, they would have grown strong enough to threaten Earth itself. Yes, he said finally. It was worth it. Diplomatic attaché Kyung-soo approached through the garden, carrying official documents from both human and Volani governments. Admiral, the formal agreements are ready for signature. The Volani Council has agreed to establish a permanent alliance with humanity. What are the terms? Mutual Defense Pact, scientific and cultural exchange, and shared intelligence about remaining Korath forces. The Volani will provide their advanced mathematics and theoretical sciences, while we provide military protection and engineering support. Cultural Exchange Coordinator Ah Young joined the group, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Sir, you should see the preliminary reports on Volani technology. Their mathematical models could advance human science by decades. And their art, she shook her head in amazement. They create beauty that moves the soul. This was the real victory, Hyunwoo realized. The battle against the Korath had been necessary, but it was only the beginning. The real achievement would be building something positive from the aftermath, creating an alliance between species that could prevent future tragedies. Military liaison Jun Ho arrived with reports from the patrol fleets. Admiral, our deep space sensors are detecting movement in neighboring systems. Other species are reaching out to establish contact. The news of our alliance with the Volani has spread. What kind of contact? Peaceful overtures mostly, several. Civilizations want to establish diplomatic relations. They're calling it the Human Protection Doctrine, the idea that humans will fight to protect peaceful species from aggression. So Young looked up from her communication station. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. President Park wants to speak with you directly. The holographic image of Earth's president appeared in the garden, her face showing a mixture of concern and pride. Admiral Hyunwoo, your actions have created a diplomatic situation unlike anything in human history. Half the Galactic Council wants to condemn us as violent interventionists. The other half wants to hire us as protectors. What are your orders, Madam President? Continue what you're doing. The Cabinet has reviewed your reports and we're unanimously in support of your actions. Earth is officially adopting a policy of protective intervention. When peaceful civilizations call for help against extinction-level threats, we will answer. This was the moment that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come. They would not be conquerors or isolationists, but guardians. The violent history that had shaped them on Earth would become the foundation for protecting others among the stars. Elder Nimtar spoke with the gravity of someone making a historical pronouncement. Today begins a new age for our galaxy. The Volani offer our knowledge to this alliance freely, not as payment for salvation, but as partners in building a better future. And if the Korath return? Asked Taemin. Admiral Hyunwoo looked around at the mixed group of humans and aliens working together to rebuild a civilization. Then we'll be ready for them. All of us together. In the weeks that followed, the alliance grew. Survivor groups from Korath-conquered worlds began to emerge from hiding, seeking the protection of the human fleet. Scientists from dozens of species came to study in Volani universities, while human engineers helped rebuild destroyed infrastructure. The galaxy began to understand that the humans from the violent world called Earth were not monsters to be feared, but guardians to be welcomed. They were dangerous, yes, perhaps the most dangerous species in known space, but they had chosen to use that danger in service of protection rather than conquest. Commander So Young, now promoted to Admiral of the 2nd Protective Fleet, stood on the bridge of her new flagship as it patrolled the border between human and Korath space. Her mission was simple: listen for distress calls and respond to threats against peaceful civilizations. "Admiral," called her communication officer, "we're receiving a transmission. Long-range mathematical sequence. It appears to be another distress call." So Young smiled, remembering the day when such a call had started this entire adventure. "Plot a course for the transmission source. All ships prepare for possible combat operations." "Ma'am, shouldn't we request permission from Earth Command first?" "Officer, we don't need permission to help people. That's what humans do." The fleet turned toward the new crisis, carrying the hopes and strength of an entire species. In the depths of space, other civilizations watched and took heart. When darkness threatened to overwhelm the light, when evil seemed about to triumph over good, there were humans willing to stand in the way. The children of Earth had found their purpose among the stars, to be the ones who answered when civilization itself was threatened, no matter the cost, no matter the odds, because in a galaxy full of predators and prey, humanity had chosen to. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when the Korath made their first serious mistake. They tried to capture a human prisoner. Marine Wu Jin had been separated from his squad during a boarding operation when his assault boat was damaged by Korath bioweapons. His armor was cracked, his oxygen was running low, and he was alone on a ship full of creatures that wanted to add his knowledge to their collective mind. The Korath capture drones found him in a damaged corridor, unconscious from blood loss. They wrapped him in organic restraints and dragged him to a processing chamber, where alien neural probes began to dig into his brain. What happened next changed the course of the battle. "Sir," called So Young from her communication station aboard, "Soul's Fury. We're getting some very strange signals from the Korath network." Admiral Hyunwoo looked up from the tactical display where human forces were slowly gaining ground against impossible odds. "What kind of signals?" "Error messages. Lots of them. Something is causing system-wide failures in their collective consciousness." Across the Korath fleet, the alien hive mind was experiencing something it had never encountered before, information it could not process. Wu Jin's memories were flooding their network, and the data was unlike anything they had absorbed from 47 previous conquests. The Korath expected to find the usual patterns: fear of death, attachment to family, desire for survival. What they found instead was the mind of a human soldier, shaped by growing up on Earth. Wu Jin's childhood memories included surviving a Category 5 hurricane, escaping from a forest fire, and learning to swim in waters filled with creatures that could bite a person in half. His military training had prepared him to fight in environments that would kill most alien species. His personal philosophy was built around the idea that sometimes you had to do terrible things to protect innocent people. The Korath neural network tried to categorize these experiences and failed. How could a single species be so individually dangerous yet also capable of self-sacrifice? How could creatures from such a violent world choose to risk their lives for people they had never met? The confusion spread through the hive mind like a virus. Korath ships began to hesitate in battle, their coordination disrupted by conflicting data they could not understand. "Commander Hee Jin," Admiral Hyunwoo called to his psychological warfare specialist. "Are you seeing this?" Hee Jin studied her displays with growing excitement. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had spent her career learning how different species thought and fought. "Sir, their hive mind is having a breakdown. They can't process human psychology." "Explain." "The Korath have conquered peaceful civilizations for decades. They understand prey species, but they've never encountered predators like us. Our mental patterns are causing cascade failures in their collective consciousness." Hyunwoo saw the opportunity immediately. "Can we use this?" "Absolutely. If we can broadcast more human sensory data into their network, we might be able to disrupt their entire fleet." Within minutes, Hyejin was working with the communication team to weaponize human memory. They gathered recordings from soldiers who had survived Earth's most extreme environments: deep ocean trenches, active volcanoes, polar blizzards, and the radioactive zones left by ancient wars. The data they transmitted was not just information, it was the sensory experience of living on a world that actively tried to kill its inhabitants every single day. The effect on the Korath was immediate and devastating. Ships began to drift, out of formation as their pilots experienced memories of surviving avalanches and earthquakes. Bioweapons started malfunctioning as their organic computers tried to process the concept of creatures that hunted apex predators for sport. "It's working," reported So Young. "Korath communication networks are failing across the fleet. They're starting to fight as individuals instead of as a collective." This was exactly what the humans needed. The Korath's greatest advantage had been their perfect coordination. As individual ships, they were dangerous, but manageable. Fighter Squadron Leader Min Ho pressed his attack, leading his pilots against Korath vessels that could no longer coordinate their defenses. All fighters target the bioships that are still connected to the network. Cut their communication links. The human pilots dove through the alien formation like sharks through a school of fish. Their weapons targeted the organic communication, arrays that linked the Korath ships to their hive mind, isolating more and more vessels from their collective intelligence. On the ground, the battle was also changing. Korath forces that had been overwhelming the Vellani cities suddenly became confused and disorganized. Without the constant guidance of their hive mind, individual Korath soldiers were much less effective. Dr. Yun-ji, the chief medical officer, was working with rescued Vellani scientists to develop better countermeasures against Korath bioweapons. Their toxic compounds are designed to work against typical carbon-based life forms, she explained to her alien colleagues. But human physiology is different. We've evolved to survive poisons that would kill most species. The Vellani scientists watched in amazement as human medics treated injuries that should have been fatal. Soldiers who had been exposed to Korath acid continued fighting with wounds that would have incapacitated any other known species. "How is this possible?" asked Vellani Dr. Nimsen, watching a human marine walk away from treatment after being dissolved partially by alien bioweapons. "Pain tolerance," Yunji replied simply. "Humans can function with injuries that would put most species into shock. We evolved on a world where getting hurt was a daily occurrence." Engineering Commander Dong Hyun was having similar success adapting human technology to help the Vellani. "Your ships are beautiful," he told Vellani engineer Talmek, "but they're not built for combat. Human vessels are designed to keep fighting even when they're falling apart." Together, they began retrofitting surviving Vellani ships with human armor and weapons. The combination was unusual but effective. Vellani precision engineering, enhanced with human durability and firepower. "Your people build things to last," Talmek observed, watching human technicians weld armor plates onto a Vellani science vessel. "We have to," Donghyun replied. "On Earth, if something breaks at the wrong time, you die. So we learn to build things that don't break." The tide of battle was turning, but the Korath still had one major advantage: numbers. Even disrupted and confused, they had hundreds of ships remaining. The humans had started with 37 and were down to 28 operational vessels. Admiral Hyunwoo studied the tactical situation. His fleet had achieved more than anyone thought possible, but they were running low on ammunition, and several ships had serious damage. The Korath were adapting to human psychological warfare, slowly regaining some coordination. "Sir," called Communication Officer Na-young, "I'm intercepting Korath strategic communications. They're calling for reinforcements from other sectors. More fleets are on the way." This changed everything. The human fleet could handle the current enemy forces, but facing fresh Korath reinforcements would be impossible. "How long until they arrive?" 18 hours, sir." Hyunwoo looked around his bridge at officers who had been fighting for almost 7 hours straight. They were exhausted, their ships were damaged, and now they faced the possibility of an even larger battle. "All ships implement Protocol Omega. We end this now." Protocol Omega was something the human military had developed but never used. It involved tactics so aggressive and dangerous that they were considered too risky for normal combat. But these were not normal circumstances. "Sir," said Tactical Officer Jae-hyun quietly, "Omega protocols have a very low survival rate." "Better than zero survival rate if we let them bring reinforcements," Hyunwoo replied. "All ships, prepare for final assault. Fighter squadrons, prepare for deep penetration strikes. Marines, get ready for simultaneous boarding of all remaining command vessels." Across the human fleet, soldiers prepared for what might be their last battle. They had come to save a peaceful species they had never met. Now they were going to risk everything to finish the job. "Admiral," called So-Young, "incoming transmission from the Vellani High Council." Elder Nimtar appeared on screen, his alien features showing what humans had learned to recognize as gratitude. "Admiral Hyunwoo, your people have already done more than we dared hope. You have given us a chance to survive. We do not ask you to sacrifice more lives for us." Hyunwoo looked at the elderly alien leader, thinking about the mathematical poetry and beautiful cities the Vellani had created. They represented something rare in the galaxy, a species that had chosen knowledge over conquest, beauty over power. "With respect, Elder Nimtar, this is not just about saving your people anymore. The Korath won't stop with you. Eventually they'll consume every peaceful civilization in the galaxy. Today we draw the line." The Admiral turned to his crew. "All hands prepare for final assault. Today we show the galaxy what humans do when evil thinks it has already won." The human fleet moved into attack formation, damaged ships alongside healthy ones, every vessel committed to the final battle. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and far from home. But they were the children of Earth, the descendants of a species that had learned to turn its capacity for violence into a tool for protection. The human fleet moved through hyperspace like ghosts in the dark, 37 ships that had been built for one purpose, to fight and survive in a universe that wanted to kill them. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Soul's Fury, watching the swirl of hyperspace outside. In 3 hours, they would drop back into normal space and face an enemy they had never fought before. "Admiral," called Jinnah from her science station. She was the fleet's best xenobiologist, a small woman with quick eyes who could speak 12 alien languages. "I've finished analyzing the Vellani cultural data." "What did you find?" Jinnah pulled up a holographic display showing the Vellani homeworld. Beautiful underwater cities glowed like jewels in the deep oceans. "They're completely peaceful, sir. No military tradition at all. They've never fought a real war. Their idea of conflict is an argument about mathematical theory." "And the enemy?" The display changed to show Korath bioships, twisted organic vessels that looked more like sea monsters than spacecraft. "The Korath are different. They're a hive mind, all connected through biological links. They consume other species and add their knowledge to their own. Each conquest makes them stronger and smarter." Commander Tai Min, the Marine leader, studied the display with professional interest. He was a compact man with scars on his hands and a reputation for impossible victories. "How many have they conquered?" "At least 47 civilizations in the past century," Jinnah replied. "Each time they learn new technologies, new tactics. They're not just destroyers, Admiral. They're collectors. They want to own everything in the galaxy." Minister Minho, the fighter squadron leader, laughed bitterly. "Sounds like they picked the wrong species to mess with. How many ships are we facing?" According to Vellani data, approximately 2,000 Korath vessels of various sizes. The bridge fell quiet. 2,000 ships against 37. Even for humans, those were bad odds. "Sir," said Chief Medical Officer Yoonji from her station, "I'm reading some concerning data from the Vellani medical files. The Korath don't just kill their enemies, they process them. They extract genetic material, memories, everything. The victims stay conscious during the procedure." Hyunwoo's jaw tightened. He had seen many horrors during his career, but this was different. This was not war or conquest. This was something closer to evil. "Engineering report," he called. Commander Dong-hyun appeared on screen from the engineering deck. His uniform was already dirty from working on the ship's weapons systems. "All ships are running at peak efficiency, Admiral. We've loaded every torpedo we have and the point defense systems are ready. But, sir, if the Korath ships are as adaptive as the data suggests, we need to be ready for anything." "What do you mean?" "Their ships are biological. They heal damage, they learn from attacks, they adapt. Our standard tactics might not work for long." Hyunwoo nodded. Human military doctrine had always been built around fighting other humans, with some adjustments for the few alien species they had encountered. But the Korath were something new. A true alien intelligence with capabilities that challenged everything humans thought they knew about warfare. "Attention all ships," he announced over the fleet communication system. "In 1 hour we will drop out of hyperspace in the Volani system. We are about to face an enemy unlike anything we have fought before. They outnumber us 50 to 1. They have been conquering civilizations for decades. They have advantages we don't understand." He paused, looking around the bridge at his officers. All of them were volunteers who had chosen to follow him into this battle despite direct orders from Earth Command to avoid alien conflicts. But they have never fought humans before. They have never faced a species that was born on a world trying to kill them every day. They don't know what it means to be the children of Earth, where everything from the weather to the wildlife wants you dead. They think they understand warfare because they've conquered 47 peaceful civilizations. The Admiral smiled grimly. They're about to learn the difference between conquest and war. As the fleet prepared for battle, Gina worked with the Volani data, trying to understand their culture better. The more she learned, the more amazed she became. The Volani had solved mathematical problems that human scientists could barely understand. They had created art that moved the soul and music that sang of deep ocean currents and ancient wisdom. They were perhaps the most intellectually advanced species humanity had ever encountered, and they were about to be destroyed by creatures who saw intelligence as something to be harvested. "Admiral," Gina called. "I'm getting new transmissions from the Volani system. The Korath have begun their final assault. The last defense stations are falling." On the screen they could see scattered data from the dying Volani fleet. Ships being consumed by biological acid, crews screaming as Korath boarding pods attached to their hulls, entire cities going dark as the invaders landed. "Time to destination?" 43 minutes, sir." Hyunwoo watched the destruction happening in real time, feeling the familiar cold anger that came before battle. This was what humans had learned during their violent history. Sometimes the only response to evil was controlled violence. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to become something the guilty feared. "All ships prepare for combat drop. Fighter squadrons ready for immediate launch. Marine units prepare for boarding operations." The fleet began its final approach to normal space. In the fighter bays, Minho and his pilots ran final checks on their craft. These were not the elegant interceptors that most alien species built. Human fighters were armored like tanks and armed like battleships, built to survive in the middle of ship-to-ship combat. In the Marine sections, Taemin's soldiers prepared for close-quarters fighting. They wore powered armor that could function in vacuum, toxic atmosphere, or underwater. Their weapons were designed to work even when damaged, even when the user was wounded, even when everything else had failed. On the medical decks, Yoonji and her staff prepared for casualties. Human combat medicine had been developed over centuries of warfare, designed to keep soldiers fighting even with injuries that would kill most alien species. And throughout the fleet, ordinary humans prepared to do something extraordinary. They were going to fight impossible odds to save people they had never met, because somewhere in the darkness between stars, someone had asked for help. "Dropping to normal space in 10 seconds, announced the navigation officer. "All ships, battle stations. This is Admiral Hyunwoo to all units. Today we fight not for Earth, not for humanity, but for the idea that civilization matters more than conquest. Today we stand between the darkness and the light." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani system. What they found there was worse than they had imagined. The 3 Volani worlds were covered in darkness. Korath bioships swarmed around them like parasites, feeding on the dying civilization below. The elegant crystal cities were being dissolved and consumed. The beautiful underwater gardens were being harvested for biological material. And in the center of it all, massive Korath command ships pulsed with stolen knowledge and stolen lives. "My God," whispered So Young from her communication station. "There are so many of them." Admiral Hyunwoo looked at the tactical display showing over 2,000 enemy contacts. Any sane military commander would retreat and call for reinforcements. But reinforcements would take weeks to arrive, and the Volani did not have weeks. "All ships weapons free. Let's announce ourselves." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Missiles and energy beams lanced out across space, striking the outer Korath ships. For a moment, the alien vessels seemed stunned. They had not detected the human approach, had not expected resistance. Then the Korath began to respond, and the real battle began. "Sir," called the tactical officer, "the enemy ships are moving to intercept. They're adapting to our weapons already." "Then we adapt faster," Yunwu replied. "All ships implement Combat Protocol 7. Time to show these things what humans do best." "What's that, sir?" The admiral smiled coldly as his ships dove into the enemy formation like wolves attacking a herd. "We improvise." The stars were dying in the Vallani system. 3 blue-green worlds spun slowly around their fading sun, and on each world, cities of crystal and flowing water grew dark one by one. Elder Nimtar floated in the High Council chamber, his pale fins trembling as he watched the tactical display. Red dots swarmed across the screen like angry insects. Each dot was a Korath ship, and there were thousands of them. "How long do we have?" asked Council Member Velima, her voice barely a whisper through the water that filled their meeting space. 2 days, maybe 3, replied General Tashara, the only Vallani who had ever studied war. Even he seemed lost now. "Our defense fleet is gone. The orbital stations are falling. Soon they will reach the surface." The Korath had come from the dark between stars. Nobody knew where they started, but everyone knew what they did. They ate worlds, not just the people or the cities, but everything. They took the knowledge, the culture, the very essence of a civilization, and made it part of themselves. Then they moved on, leaving empty rocks behind. For 3 years, the Korath had consumed world after world, moving closer to the Vallani home system. The peaceful Vallani had tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They had tried to fight, but they were not fighters. They built beautiful things and solved impossible math problems and wrote poetry about the flow of water. They did not know how to kill. "We could surrender," suggested one council member. "Perhaps they will be merciful." Elder Nimtar's fins fluttered with something that might have been anger in another species. "The Korath do not show mercy. They consume. We have seen what happened to the Althani, to the Mortek Empire. Nothing remains but empty shells." The chamber fell silent except for the gentle bubble of their breathing apparatus. Outside, through the crystal walls, they could see their beautiful capital city. Gardens of seagrass swayed in the currents, and schools of bright fish swam between the buildings. In 2 days it would all be gone. "There is one option," said General Tashara slowly. "The deep space array. We could send our knowledge into the void. Our mathematics, our music, our history. Perhaps some advanced species will find it and remember us." "A funeral song for a dead civilization," whispered Velama. "More than that," said Nimtar, his old eyes bright with desperate hope. "A call for help. We encode everything we know about the Korath, their ships, their tactics, their weaknesses. If there is anyone out there who can fight them, they will need this information." The council voted quickly. They had no time for long debates. Within hours, every Vallani scientist and scholar worked to compress their entire civilization into a single transmission. Their greatest mathematical discoveries, their most beautiful art, and most importantly, everything they had learned about their enemy. The message went out into the dark, carrying the hopes of a dying race. Far away, in a system the Vallani had never heard of, So Young sat at her communication station aboard the human deep space monitoring post. She was young for such an important job, only 25, but she had the best ears in the fleet for picking up alien signals. "Admiral Yunwu to the bridge," she called into her comm unit. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked. "The controls. I'm getting something strange on the long-range sensors." Admiral Hyunwoo arrived within minutes. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his days as a ship engineer. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies and survived 3 different alien first contact scenarios. Nothing usually surprised him. "What do you have?" "So Young? It's a mathematical sequence, sir. But it's not random. Look at this." She put the signal on the main screen. Numbers and equations flowed past like a waterfall of data. These are advanced theorems, but they're wrapped around something else. Navigation data, tactical information, and... She paused, her eyes wide. Sir, I think it's a distress call. Hyun-woo studied the screen. He had learned to read alien mathematics during his career, but this was beyond anything he had seen. Can you translate it? Working on it now, sir. So-young's fingers flew across her controls. The math is incredible. They've solved problems our best scientists are still working on. But the tactical data? Sir, they're describing an enemy, force that could threaten the entire sector. As the translation took shape, the story became clear. A peaceful species called the Villani was being destroyed by something called the Korath swarm. The Korath consumed entire civilizations, growing stronger with each conquest. The Villani had maybe days left. Sir, So-young said quietly, they're not just asking for help. They're trying to warn everyone. The Korath will not stop with them. Admiral Hyun-woo was quiet for a long time. Earth's policy was clear. No involvement in alien wars. Humanity had learned the hard way that the galaxy was dangerous. Most alien species saw humans as monsters from a death world, too violent and unpredictable to trust. It was easier to stay isolated. But as he read the Villani message, Hyun-woo thought about his own people. Humans knew what it was like to face extinction. They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that would have destroyed most species. They knew what it was like to send desperate messages into the dark, hoping someone would care enough to help. So young. How long would it take us to reach their system? With the full fleet? 3 days, sir. But Admiral, our orders? I know our orders. Hyun-woo looked at the tactical data again. The Korath ships were like nothing he had ever seen. Biological vessels that could adapt and grow. An enemy that consumed knowledge and became stronger. If they finished with the Villani, they would not stop there. He thought about the long history of his species. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years, but they had also learned something important. When true evil appeared, when something threatened to destroy everything good in the world, humans stood together. They fought not because they loved war, but because someone had to stand between the darkness and the light. Contact the fleet commanders, he said finally. Emergency meeting in 1 hour. And So-young? Yes, sir. Send a message back to the Villani. Tell them help is coming. As So-young worked to compose the reply, Admiral Hyun-woo walked to the observation deck. Through the thick windows he could see the stars. Somewhere out there a peaceful species was dying. They had reached out across the void, not knowing that their message would reach the descendants of Earth, the children of a world that had tried to kill them every single day. The Villani thought they were sending a funeral song into space. They did not know they had just contacted the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Predators who had learned to use their killing instincts to protect instead of destroy. The human fleet began to move. 37 warships carrying the hopes and fury of an entire species. They were going to war against an enemy they had never seen, to save people they had never met, because that was what humans did. In the Villani system, Elder Nimtar received the reply message as the Korath ships entered the outer atmosphere of his homeworld. The translation was simple and short, but it carried more hope than he had felt in months. Message received. Fleet en route. Hold on. We're coming. The sender was listed as Humanity, 3rd Fleet from Sol. Nimtar did not know what a Sol was or what kind of species would call itself humanity. He only knew that somewhere in the darkness, someone had heard their call for help. As the Korath began their final assault, the Villani prepared to make their last stand. They did not know that help was coming from the most unlikely source in the galaxy. They did not know that they had just contacted the one species in known space that was too stubborn to let evil win without a fight.